So at one point, I had two phones. It was difficult because they're afraid people are going to hang themselves with the phone cord. So they don't actually come together and they're pretty short. So I was actually going between two phones talking to Bear Stearns and JP Morgan at the same time.
That's a funny still shot.
He's a funny still shot as he's hanging himself with his phone cords. So I just want to lay out the timeline. Bannon asked Epstein what he's doing in the middle of September about Lehman. Middle of September. And he explains about hearing this for the first time and makes these phone calls. Bear Stearns being acquired by JP Morgan happened at the end of May of that year. Epstein went to jail at the end of June of that year. So his timeline is all screwed up. And okay, memory is a fickle thing, but I'm putting this under the category of this man just tells stories. Hi, Bob.
Hey, Adam.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about an interview here tonight that came out in the Epstein File dumps. And just a little behind-the-scenes teaser. I clicked on it to watch it, and then I'm 10 minutes in, and I texted Bob, and I said, oh, my God, have you seen this? It's the most amazing interview I've ever seen in my life, I think. And Bob eventually agreed.
Yeah, let me just say, folks, that in case you're getting fatigue, my initial reaction was, come on, and we can't possibly cover this because I know it's been out for a bit because there was the fractionalized banking thing that I'm sure some of you have seen. And so I figured it's been out for a bit. I haven't seen animals pulling clips from it. What's the big deal? And then I started watching it, just as a courtesy. And then I was texting Adam and like, do we just need to watch the whole thing and do Mystery Science Theater 3000? So we're not going to do that in the interest of brevity, but it really is the kind of thing, like once you got into it, I was like, holy cow, this is a crazy interview.
Yeah, literally, folks, if I'd had my way, we would have done a live stream for 4 or 5 hours and just mocked this 2-hour interview.
6 of you would have been entertained very much.
Five, if we're actually running the numbers. So yeah, we got that upcoming. But before we get there, Bob wanted to talk about some things he saw on the social medias.
Yeah, so just the context here, folks, just since we are still talking about Epstein here, and this may get this out of our system, right? Like, again, unless, when we think we're out, they pull us back in. But I really did feel like we had to make 2 clarifying points here, and we're going to use some tweets that, as we're recording this, are from today, just to make some basic points here. Because, again, the stuff is raging back and forth, and now it's like Massey and his defenders versus the MAGA fans, basically.
Yeah, so shall we start with the first one?
Yeah. So here, this is just something that Massey, I don't know if somebody tipped him off or he had this as a trump card or whatever, but Massey chimed in today's February 17th when we're recording this, responding to J.D. Vance's tweets way back in September of 2021. So in case you're in your car or something, I'll read it. So the first one is J.D. Vance. Again, this is from September of 2021, posting a story. Is it from the, I can't tell where, can you read what that's from? Where the article is from? The Week, does it say?
Yeah,
anyway,
I think it's theweek.com.
Yeah. So anyway, it's got Epstein's famous shot there. So it's J.D. Vance posting, an external link on Twitter back in September 2021 saying, I think about this column about once a month. And then he follows up, J.D. Vance does, back in September 2021 saying, remember when we learned that our wealthiest and most powerful people were connected to a guy who ran a literal child sex trafficking ring, and then that guy died mysteriously in a jail, and now we just don't talk about it. Okay, so that's what J.D. Vance said back in September 2021, and then Massey today, being sassy as he is wont to do, chimed in with a new tweet and said, yeah, why is that? And then he retweeted that, and of course everybody piled on or whatever. So my point in bringing this up is because I've seen a lot of people saying, without evidence, right? Like that's the way the mainstream media would say stuff about Trump. Trump claimed without evidence, but I've seen people claiming without evidence that Massey never talked about Epstein before Trump came back in. And that's not true. And Massey, in his defense, showed some screenshots of him
J.D. Vance never,
literally demanding the release of the Epstein Files, when Biden was still in office, right? So that's just, for one thing, not true. But also, even if it were true, and you say, well, geez, how come everyone's, why is Massey and his cronies making a big fuss about this now that Trump can't? It's because a bunch of people in the Trump administration, not so much Trump himself, even though he kind of said he'd be open to it, but some of them clearly were pounding on this, most notably Dan Bongino, but also, as we see here, the current vice president was saying the kind of stuff, that others just took in stride. Remember in Pam Bondi giving the binders out and saying the Epstein client list is on my desk after Trump was back in office, right? So we're not making this stuff up. This was, it was their pivot. Like as an analogy, imagine, you know how, Adam, we covered the Hoppe-Milei feud, and Hoppe saying like he's been in there this long and he hasn't closed the central bank. Can you possibly imagine if someone said in response to Hoppe, well, Donald Trump hasn't shut the Fed down. I don't see you criticizing him for enlisting every other world leader, and say, how come? And the obvious answer would be because Milei openly campaigned on shutting down the central bank. That's why the fact that he hasn't is an indictment of him more so than others. So likewise here, Trump was open to it, and plenty of his top people made this a central theme of what they were doing. And we're going to get in there and clean up the swamp, and Biden's been hiding, protecting pedos and whatever. So again, this is just the Orwellian nature of this is just shocking to behold. Again, as I always say, it doesn't surprise me that people have their teams and they're, coming out with talking points. I just can't believe how stupid these talking points are.
Yeah, and from the outside, like we don't know what's going on and what the redactions really reveal, but you get the impression that all these warriors wanted to go in and drain the swamp, and then they actually got there so they could do that. And then they got shepherded into a secret room and opened, they walked in. We heard a loud buzzing, and then they walked out 15 seconds later and was like, yeah, there's nothing to see here. There was no, it's like, what happened? What was in the room? What did they show you? All right, you had a second one.
Yes.
Do you want to prelude it?
Why don't you just flash it up and I'll...
You got it.
Okay. Just because I couldn't remember the exact wording. So here, the context is just the never-ending saga of Michael Tracy. And again, it doesn't surprise me that Michael Tracy is fulfilling this role and that some people would take it up. What amazes me is how many people, and I am acquaintances, colleagues with some of these people, and they're just like, well, yeah. Anyway, it's shocking to me how many people apparently, and they're not just all bots, because I literally know some of them are at this point are like, yeah, we're waiting for someone to show us something, a shred, that there's anything here and there's nothing here. And I'm like going crazy. What are you talking about? But anyway, this is just one example. So I think it's worth going through this just to make sure people understand. Because I get how if you're really not paying attention to this stuff and it's, he said, meaning, the pundits going at each other. So anyway, here, Derek Bros, was kind of throwing down with Michael Tracy on these various things. And so here, what we're showing folks is, in case you're listening to your car or something, Michael Tracy is retweeting Derek Bros. So let me first read what Derek was saying. And again, this is in the midst of them feuding over this stuff. So Derek had said, talking to Michael Tracy, every post you make gets a bit more ridiculous. We know there was a sweetheart deal to cover up what was actually happening. He was recruiting young teenage girls for massages, abuse, and then ... and it's a show more, right? So I can't read. And that was from February 13th. On that same day, then Tracy retweets that and says, there was no, quote, sweetheart deal, another myth. Over a year of incarceration, including time in solitary confinement, lifetime registration as a sex offender, and requirement to pay civil damages plus attorney fees for government-designated, quote, victims, and victims is in quotation marks, is not a, quote, sweetheart deal. Okay, so this is one thing. Unfortunately, he had another one where he said it somewhat differently and said, this, alleged sweetheart deal came from literally one victim who is 17 and, such and such months old at the time. This notion, you know what I mean? He's again, if all you read were Michael Tracy's stuff, you would think like, oh my gosh, people really are like I get why people are comparing it to Russiagate. If Michael Tracy were correct in the things he was saying, then yes, this would be Russiagate. It's just, he's not. And at this point, I don't think it's, he's just honestly mistaken. This is clearly in my mind him just, shucking and jiving and like just throwing whatever he can to try to sow the seeds of doubt. Incidentally, before I forget, if Michael Tracy were literally Epstein's defense lawyer, I would have no problem with it. In other words, I think everybody needs somebody, and then do whatever you got to do. Like, don't,
Sure. Yeah.
Don't falsify evidence behind this. You know what I mean? Don't or have, witnesses killed or something. But I'm saying, I want, in a adversarial legal system,
Sure.
that, everybody gets an attorney and they should, defend him to the fullest extent. But here, given that he's just a pundit and is commenting and is trying to sway public opinion, that no, what he's doing, in my mind, is knowingly dishonest. Okay, so again, from there, that one that I read to you folks, literally, and then the one that I summarized, and I'm doing it justice, where he's trying to say, this is a myth, this idea that there's all these, little girls or something. No, these were, knowing, and the reason he said government designated victim in quotation marks, I think he's trying to say, yeah, these girls were prostitutes. I know that offends some of you, and you got your swooning couches and whatever, but sorry, some girls sell their body for money, and some of them are, below a certain age in some states, and blah, 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 and this is all just, BS, arbitrary lines. And these girls were, it wasn't that he forced anybody. They were willing to do it. And then later they get some high-powered attorneys and they smell blood in the water and a big paycheck, and they make up a bunch of crazy stories, right? That's what he's alleging. Okay.
Yes.
So, and you can see too why he's saying, how is this a sweetheart deal? There was one girl that was a, willing person at the time, it's completely consensual. And, and he ends up doing whatever it was, 13, 18 months or something, including solitary confinement. You know what I mean? So that's how he's, okay. So now let me just make sure everyone understands, because this is kind of important, this idea of the sweetheart deal. And this is why people thought originally, what the heck is going on here? This guy is powerful. He's being protected by higher ups. What's the deal? All right. So just from his Wikipedia entry, and again, I should say, if you want to know more about this, go listen to Martyr Maid's podcast series on this stuff. Again, he did the Epstein thing before it was cool. That's why Tucker Carlson had Daryl Cooper on when Epstein, got in the news again, was to talk about this stuff, because Daryl really is an expert. And so, I'm reading this just Wikipedia just to have a source to go to. But I mean, this lines up with what Daryl went through, and I read some things, back when this was in the news originally. But so anyway, it says, in 2005, police in Palm Beach, Florida began investigating Epstein after a parent reported that he had sexually abused her 14-year-old daughter. Okay, so what originally got the police looking into this was a mom called the police and said, yeah, there's this guy, Jeffrey Epstein, whatever, in my neighborhood or whatever, down the street from her school. I don't know exactly where. And the girl was 14 at the time. Okay, so that's that. Federal officials identified 36 girls, some as young as 14 years old, whom Epstein had allegedly sexually abused. Epstein pleaded guilty and was convicted in 2008 by a Florida state court of procuring child for prostitution, of soliciting a prostitute. And so I think that girl was, 17 and change. And he was convicted of only these two crimes as part of a plea deal agreed by Alexander Acosta of the U.S. Department of Justice, and he served 13 months in custody, which included extensive work release. Okay, so that's the point. Was there were, in terms of that original Florida investigation, there were 36, alleged victims that were coming forward and, telling investigators, yeah. And, this wasn't in the Wikipedia thing, but I know, Daryl went over it. Partly why they were so sure they had this guy and that they were going to throw the book at him was these girls weren't all friends, right? They were different.
Telling what I mean? The same story.
And they tell the same kind of story, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't just like one went and then, oh, there's this rich guy. We can really get this guy. Let's get our stories straight. That a lot of them were, different friend groups and stuff, all telling the police the same kind of story. And again, it was multiple ones were like under, 16. Excuse me. So anyway, and so then the point was, given all this stuff they had against him, that then he ends up cutting a deal where he just pleads guilty to, soliciting prostitution and prostitution from a minor. And that's it. And no federal charges. And so that's what people are talking. It's not so much given what he pled guilty to, the punishment he received. It's rather what they let him merely plead guilty to and dropped everything else. That's really what, well, also the work release stuff where he gets to go home and stuff.
15 months. Yeah. And it was over in 15 months. He's out earlier.
Right. So there's that element too, but also a big part of it. And the whole thing with Acosta, people might remember, is when he was nominated by Trump, was it to be labor secretary or something? I forget.
I can't remember.
Trump, put Acosta in his, would have been his first administration. And they, and in the vetting procedure, I don't think it was like in the open hearing. I think it was like, ahead of time, when they just talked to the guy to see, is there anything that's going to come up when we put you up here that we need to know about? And they asked him, and I don't remember how we heard this because later I think Acosta tried to deny it, but somehow the word went out that originally when they the Republican staffers or whatever asked him, hey, your opponents might come and wonder, why did you give this guy such a sweetheart deal? And he apparently told them, because I was told from, somebody else that, he belongs to intelligence. And that's why go ahead and just let this go with such, seemingly. And again, this is the thing. This is what I meant to, Adam, if you remember the last time we covered this, where I said it was like the movies where the the person in the DA's office has this thing. And then he's like, Chief, what are you doing? We're letting the guy. And that's the thing here. Like Cooper went into like the lady at the DA's office who was in charge of this, and it has emails and stuff too. It's not just him, thinking, I wonder what she was thinking and how she felt. Like, he has emails and stuff that she was sending to her superiors or whatever when this deal was cooked up, saying like, what are we doing? This is crazy. Look at how much we got on this guy. So again, this is what people mean. But if you were just reading Michael Tracy, you would think that no, there was one prostitute that, and also too, there's stuff in there about the girls told the other girls to have fake IDs and stuff. And so, so from Tracy's point of view, you would think we're talking about one girl and Epstein thought she was 19.
Yeah.
And this is why we're having a witch hunt over this guy. Give me a break. Right. So
as opposed to this operation where he's getting some of these girls to rope in other girls to come along. Yeah. Anyway, and we know all these other things. He's tied into all these powerful people and all the rest of the things in the Epstein file dump. So why in the world anybody would put victims in quotes and be arguing that guys who do this sort of thing should get lighter sentences? And nothing to see here. It's very strange.
Okay. Well, that probably took longer than I meant to, but
I'm sure it did. I want to dive into this interview. I guess I knew who Jeffrey Epstein was. I'd seen his picture. I'd seen all the stills, photos with him. I knew the story, but I'd never actually seen him on video or heard him speak. So this 2-hour interview was my first interaction with like who he's like when he's having a conversation with somebody. And I was just blown away because I would have thought that this guy is savvy with the stock markets and money in general, investments. At least he should be savvy enough to know the ins and outs of money laundering and all the things you need to do to move money here and there surreptitiously. If he is involved in the CIA in various ways to compromise people, I would think he'd have a whole bunch of a skill set there, be very suave. And we're going to get into some of the goofy things he says in this interview that disabused me of any notion that he was a slick character. But before we even get there, I just want to play 2 real quick pieces of this interview.
Before you do that, this will be fun because actually I think my take is a little different from yours.
Okay.
That actually when I was watching this, to me, I was like, oh, now I totally can make sense of all the stuff we know about this guy.
Okay. Well,
so I'm not, to be clear, I'm not saying like, just as I expected. I'm not saying that. I didn't know what to expect, but I'm just saying the more I watched, the more I was like, oh, I could see how this guy could do the stuff that, on paper, I know he did.
Well, we'll get into that. There's a method to I don't know if it's madness exactly, but he does have some skills, but not the ones I thought. This interview is amazing.
Now, let's take a break for a totally organic conversation about a great company.
Hey, Bob. Remember the merch tables I saw the last time I tabled for the Libertarian Party? Everything went sideways for those guys.
Hard to forget, especially since you've told me 3 times already. What could those poor schlubs do to make things better?
I've been hearing great things about the Swan Brothers. They offer premium gear, embroidered polos, durable tees, and they'll set up a professional online store at no cost. They handle design, printing, and shipping end to end. Lots of options, too. Hats, mugs, bags, even branded socks. And if you run out of sizes on site, they provide a QR code so people can order and have items shipped directly.
That sounds amazing. Who else would that help?
Pretty much anyone. Startups doing promo, nonprofits fundraising, sports leagues outfitting teams, churches, you name it. Quick turnaround, fair pricing, and volume discounts. Take a look at theswanbrothers.com/cross.
Okay, organic conversation over. Back to the show.
Let me just play the first one here.
I want to know how planets move. I want to know how things around me move.
Pardon me, I forgot to say. He's discussing Isaac Newton.
Okay.
Discussing... Yeah.
Do you mind also just giving folks, so he's talking to Steve Bannon and then what you know about the context of this?
Oh, you're absolutely right. I'm sorry. Yeah, this interview came out in the Epstein Files dump, one of the versions of it. These interviews occurred in the spring or early summer of 2019. And Epstein is paying Bannon. I don't know whose idea this was, but it was either going to be a documentary or part of an image rehabilitation tour. So there's 15 hours of video here of interviews, and the part that was released was a 2-hour mashup. It's recorded over at least 2 days, maybe more. And then nothing ended up happening with the project because, like, the next month or something, Epstein got arrested for the final time and never again saw the light of day. So these are interviews. At times it looks like Steve Bannon is trying to just give him some media training or something. Sometimes it looks like he's trying to do a friendly interview, sometimes a hostile one. It bounces around a little bit, but so that's where these interviews came from. It was Steve Bannon interviewing Jeffrey Epstein, and I think you just get a glimpse of who this guy actually was, one that I'd never seen before.
Great.
So in this clip, they're talking about science, and Jeffrey Epstein is putting himself in the mind of Isaac Newton as he was thinking about the calculus. Here we go.
I want to know how planets move. I want to know how things around me move. Can we find formulas? Can I find formulas that explain what I see in the physical world?
Okay, formulas, that's one. Whatever that verbal tick was gets a little worse here in my second clip. This time he says what he's talking about. He's talking about a book written by Schrodinger.
Schrodinger wrote a very famous book about what is life. He was trying to figure out a way, can he describe the difference formulaically between things that are alive and things that are dead?
Formulaically.
I could just see Michael Tracy. I'm 20 minutes into this thing, and all they're doing is making fun of the way the guy talks. That's all they got. They got nothing.
That's right. First of all, I wasn't expecting the accent. Like, I didn't know where this guy was from, what his origin story was, because when you hear, whatever this Dalton place was in Harvard, I don't know, I expect a certain class of individual, and that wasn't what we got here. What did you think when you heard the way he was mispronouncing that word? And
well, it's funny because so again, folks, Adam watched it first, and then I was trying to catch up to him, and then the more I watched, I was texting him like, "Oh, now I see what you're talking about. Wow, this is amazing." And by the way, we're not going to be able to do justice to this. Like, we could have played
not at all
70% of the whole thing and commented on it, but
yes.
So if you're intrigued by what we show here, there is more where that came from. Again, to be clear, apparently there were 15 hours of footage, but they only released 2.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't know if the other 13 involve national security or what, but in any event. So yeah, I know you texted me and said, listen to how he says formula. And it did sound funny, but I didn't hear the formulaically until you just played it here. Like, it didn't jump out at me. I have to say, I'm sorry. I went in primed expecting him to be bluffing on everything, right? Because that's what I had seen some other people who had watched this, and the only comment, I didn't see anyone playing clips from it. Except for the fractionalized banking, some people asked me, and we'll get to that, folks, in a minute. That's one of the clips we'll cover. Some people had asked me about that, but other than that, I didn't see any clips from this. I just saw some people saying, why does anyone think this guy is James Bond? He obviously doesn't know anything. Doesn't know his ass from his elbow. And I had to, so I was, even though I was primed, when he was talking about, like Bannon asks him, why do people hold Newton in such esteem? He didn't, like, to me, one of the big things was Newton realized I had the insight, maybe the same principle that explains gravity, famously, why does the apple fall here, is the same thing that explains why the moon goes around the way it does. So he didn't say that, which to me, like, that's one of the most brilliant, insights in human history. But what he did say was decent enough in terms of, so
I'm not even saying like what he's saying is wrong. It's just that it's such a pop level understanding. Like, he saw a podcast about it once, or a documentary, or read the summary of some book on the subject. And he has, I wish we could have played everything. I made clips that would have lasted about an hour and a half. Early on, Bannon asked him how he got involved in the Rockefeller University. And Epstein responds with this long, rambling story that Abe Simpson could have come with about Texas Instrument calculators and various individual people and the way they introduced their chauffeurs as their driver, or their colleague, not their driver. And it was just a misdirection. It ate up 8 minutes. And it was pure nonsense.
Yeah.
And he's got this other thing that he does. One of his early aha moments, I think, is being involved in the Santa Fe Institute. But he understands, or at least did when he was younger, the difference between a complicated system and a complex system. One being, yes, this is difficult and complicated, but it's understandable. And the other being, we don't know what's going on here. Mm-hmm. It's possible we never will. And then he uses that as a dodge for every answer. Bannon asked him several times to explain things like various parts of the financial system or inflation or something. And he would just immediately pivot to complexity and an analogy about how, like, a human body is a really complex thing. He talked more about medicine than he did finance in this interview. It was astonishing.
So, yeah, and again, we can't document every example, folks, but you're right. There were, so let me be clear. I think he's a liar, right? He's very dishonest in this interview in a few places, and we'll show folks in one place where he's either just hallucinating or lying about stories he's telling.
Oh, yeah.
But he knew more about various, like, even there when he was talking, when he asked him, like, about Newton and Leibniz inventing calculus. And what's the deal with calculus? And I mean, you're right. In any one given thing, if he had listened to a pod, but it's kind of like, all right, but he wasn't caught. He did have the podcast. He had, like, I don't want to say Lex Friedman, because Lex Friedman knows way more math than Epstein does. You see? I'm still does/did. But my point is that he had that answer ready on a bunch of stuff. And again, I was primed waiting to grab a clip to say, let's show how he's bluffing here. And it was more, I guess, like you say, it's not so much that he would be bluffing. It's more he would take the conversation elsewhere and bring up an analogy instead of being caught.
What I saw was a shtick polished over decades that works at the cocktail party level when you're trying to seem smart. And I wish we could we're going to show this guy's face in multiple, but I want everyone to watch this interview. We'll post a link. Look at this man's face. He fidgets. He's got these tells for, like, when he like, we all have this thing we do when you know what somebody's talking about and you go, nod. And then when he doesn't know what the person is talking about, he freezes. And then he's got this thing where he looks down and decides which one of his repertoire of things he could talk about, Newton or whatnot, to just move this conversation. And let's talk about the body some more. What is heart failure after all?
Yeah.
What caused the stroke? Was it the hair on your head? After all, that was part of the body. And this guy's a fraud.
Okay, let me say two quick things before I forget, and then we'll get in the material here, folks. So one is, you're right, but there were several times where Bannon was annoying me. Like he was trying to pin down Epstein to say something, and Epstein's point was like, no, we don't know. And I think that was a plausible response given the type of question.
I agree.
And Bannon just kept hammering, like, no, give me an answer. And that's when he would switch to the medical. So I get what you're saying, but on some of them, I almost understand why he was like, I told you what the answer is and you don't want to hear it. So I'll try to give you an analogy.
It puts me in this weird place because like I share his epistemology on some of these things where objective truth is not known. And, you know, I get the distinction. But what I'm saying is I saw a guy using that as a shield.
Fair enough.
A well-worn shield. He loves to polish that. Who knows?
I guess what I'm saying is that at times I wish I had been doing the interview and like, Bannon, get out of here. Let me sit here. Let me, you know. And then the other thing I just want to say, you know, I don't know if confess is the right word, but I totally could get it. And one time when I was testifying I think I've testified 3 times. And one of the times Barney Frank was in the room with us. I may have talked about it with you. I don't remember. And he came in and he was like, you know, folks, I can't manufacture minutes. And it was like something about it. It was like, I could totally see how you could just be in a room with that guy and you would want to write him a check and you would want to do like, you know what I mean? He just had some way of making it that you wanted to do what you could to help the guy out. And I was like, this is why he is, you know, so high on these committees and whatever. I totally got it. And then I'll tell you another one too, just with this stuff I was an undergrad at Hillsdale College and I was talking to this girl. We were in like the student cafe, like the lounge or something, the snack room, whatever the hell they called it. I can't remember. And studying for finals or something. I don't even know how it came up, but I was mad at like the hypocrite other students. I was an angry young man. And the only reason I'm going on this story is because like it was so ironic and blew up in my face. And so I want to confess. And I said something like, you know, these people are all against, you know, the Democrats but I bet you, like, if Bill Clinton walked in here, like, these kids would all be, like, posing for a photo with him or something, right? So I was hammering the hypocrite students. And this girl goes, it's funny. And she goes into her purse and pulls out, and she had a photo of her family vacation, and she's posing with Bill Clinton, right? And you know what I did? I was like, how did you meet Bill Clinton? And I was like a little fangirl. And, like, I caught myself, like, 3 seconds into it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I just loathe myself. But anyway, so I'm just saying, again, it's easy in hindsight now, but if this dude, you think he's a, you know, billionaire financier and he's got a private jet and he's doing all this stuff and he has all these connections and he's sitting there talking to you and wow, he knows about calculus and he knows about, you know, neural nets and he knows about this and clearly he knows about finance because he's, you know, he's this wheeler and dealer that's worth $1 billion. I can totally see how he wove this spell and sucked people into it. So that's all I'll say.
I can see it too. I will only say that there's an IQ level above which this would not have worked. Because he's not, you know, he's bad at this. Well, let's dive into the interview. And again, I wish I could show you the whole thing. Do you want to say anything before we play the fractionalized one?
Is that where we are?
Yeah. Bannon is asking him. That's not true. Epstein is trying to explain money to Bannon or something like that. And maybe we should just play
is this the long one, just to pace people?
That's pretty long, yeah.
Okay, so I think this... Yeah, so folks, this is the longest one, just in case you're wondering, like, geez, how many... This is the... And you'll see, we couldn't really cut it, but the other ones are shorter than this, just in case you want to pace yourself.
All right, here we go.
If you, Mr. Bannon, if I said your assets increased last year, you'd say, that sounds pretty good. And I'd say, what does that mean to you? You'd say, well, I have more money. I guess I'm wealthier. I'd say, yes. And if your debt increased, would you feel wealthier or poorer? You'd say, well, I don't want to have increased debt. I don't like the idea of that sound, increased debt. Now, that and world leaders understand when their assets go up, they feel better. However, institutions like banks, things that people don't really understand are financial underpinnings of banks. When I say your bank, Mr. Bannon, you have the Bannon Bank, you doubled your assets. Sounds good, but what does it really mean? It means people owe you more money. You don't have any more money. What? Yeah. A bank's assets are how much it is owed by other people. That's crazy. So if the bank goes from a $2 billion of assets to $10 billion, it means people owe it an additional $8 billion, but their assets have gone up. So the terminology of assets and liabilities is different for banks. It's not natural. And what most people, and you ask questions about world leaders, there's many people, I think your old boss Mercer understood, there's a fundamental part of money which is called fractionalized banking. And fractionalized banking is something that finance people understand, and the people on the street, and when I say people on the street, that's where I was when I started on Wall Street, would find it impossible to believe. Impossible. Why? Bannon Bank, I give you $1, just one single dollar. In our system of banking, I would say, okay, Steve, I gave you $1. How much could you lend out to your friends? And your natural reaction would be probably something less than $1 because I want to keep something in my pocket. The way our system works is if you as a bank are holding my dollar, you can lend out an additional $8 or $9.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, what led into that question was Bannon was trying to get Epstein to say something about how dumb world leaders were, how they don't understand high finance. And so what you just heard, it was his response. And all I heard was how a person who doesn't really understand the topic is just trying to bob and weave and shine on the listener. It's like how a blustering uncle would try to explain a complicated question to his niece when he doesn't really know, but he knows a little something about something.
I understand what you're saying. That I'll just say this on that. So let me do the assets and liabilities and then the fractionalized thing. So if the assets and liabilities, I understand what he was trying to say. I think he botched it.
Yeah.
All right. So it is true because I've encountered this too. Like when I'm trying to explain banking, like bookkeeping operations to people, and it is weird because if you have more money, if you have more in your checking account, you think I'm wealthier. That's my asset. But from the bank's point of view, if you went from originally having $1,000 in your checking account, now you have $2,000. From the bank's point of view, that's the liability is higher, right? So the checking account balances are liabilities to banks, assets to houses. So that's what he was trying to get at there. But he still fumbled it, right? Because he was making it sound like for you, as an individual, you want your assets to be higher and your debts to be lower. That's also true for banks. They want their assets to be higher and their debts to be lower, right? And so, the counterintuitive part comes in, and also too, what he was making it sound like, if your assets go up, that's good, right? You say you have more money. So again, banks want their assets to go up. It's just the part that he's right is to say, typically a bank's assets going up, it doesn't mean it has more money, although it could, right? If it had more cash in the vault, that would be an increase in its assets, right? So I get what he was trying to do there, but Bob, again, he botched it.
Again, it's like an uncle talking to a 9-year-old, or a guy talking to the stripper at the bar.
Or talking to Steve Bannon.
I see your point, but he's not coming off like a real wise guy, especially when he's just making these basic errors. Like, yes, our system multiplies, increases the money supply based on, the $1, but it's not that Bannon Bank goes out and loans the 9. It's, the one guy takes a loan, deposits in his bank, and then that one can.
Well, all right. So that's good. In here again, it's nuanced. So I'll say it this way: he didn't say anything worse there than what Richard Werner said to Tucker Carlson. So some might take that as faint praise, but and my point, and this the reason I'm getting is because this is funny, and this is how like the pure credit creation people get so mad at the stupid fractional reserve people. So I'll be real fast because I know there's so much we gotta get through. But if let's say there's not right now reserve requirements, but let's say legally, if you're a bank, you have to have 10% reserves, right? It's true. If someone deposited an extra $1 in your bank, so now you got an extra $1 in the vault, you could go lend out nine more dollars, right? Or I should say advance loans of $9, right? Because lending out makes it sound like you're taking money. And what I mean by that is grant loans to people and credit and mark up their checking accounts, right? You could have 9 separate customers, each borrowing $1. And strictly speaking, what that means is you credit their checking accounts an extra $1 a piece. And in terms of the accounting and everything, you could do that. And if the government stopped you in that moment and checked and said, are you satisfied in your reserve requirements? You could say, yep, there's $10 in total checking account balances right now. The first guy who deposited thinks he's got $1. 9 more in new loans. That's $10 outstanding, and it's backed up by I got $1 in the vault. So that's the sense in which what he's saying is true.
I gotcha.
But the point is, in practice, you would be dumb to do that as a bank because of those new loans you created. Some people are going to spend them with customers who don't bank with you. And then in the interbank clearing, that more than the $1 is going to get drained away, right? So that's why the old textbooks used to teach it as you get $1, you set aside a dime, and you lend out 90 cents because you're worried that that guy goes and spends it. That's the whole point of taking out a loan, is to spend it. And then, you lose the 90, but then that gets deposited and they lend out 81 and then blah, blah, blah. Right. So that's the distinction between the two. All right. That's more than we need to get into here, but
anyway. Way more. All I'll say is,
I'm going to be the Michael Tracy of this podcast. I can just see this how we're going.
I can see the way this is going. That's fine. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, go watch this man's face. You see what I mean. All right. This story is absolutely bonkers. Bannon is asking Epstein where he was when the 2008 financial collapse happened. We have 2 clips we're going to play sort of back to back.
Okay. Maybe this was the long one, but I promise, folks, after this, they're short.
Okay.
But you're not going to be bored.
September 14th, 2008, where were you?
Sorry?
It was the night they put Lehman Brothers in bankruptcy in London.
I was in jail.
Seriously?
Yes.
So the financial crisis of 2008 happened when you were in jail?
Yes.
Oh, this is going to be so amazing. This is going to be so amazing. I take it you didn't have your Wall Street Journal dropped off to you in the morning, your Financial Times?
No.
How did you hear about how did you hear about, because I want
I forgot about this, but yes.
I'm trying to get, this is going to be amazing. Let's go back and do that again. Sunday afternoon, because I want to find out about people, the geniuses understanding the complexity of the financial system. Because I think the best example we have is the financial crisis, the crash of 2008. Sunday afternoon, September 14th, I think it was, 2008, is when they were working feverishly in Midtown Manhattan at the Lehman Brothers offices and at various law firms around town, and with the Secretary of Treasury in the Federal Reserve, what they're going to do with Lehman. They decided they weren't going to save it. And so they prepared to put it into bankruptcy at the opening of the market in London the next day. How did you hear about what was going to happen to Lehman Brothers, and what did you immediately think when you heard they was going to be put into bankruptcy?
I'm glad you asked that question. I was in solitary confinement September 14th. And again, some of the public stories about the wonderful time I had in jail and my work release, which didn't come till months after. I'd been there since June in an 8x10 cell with a bed in the back, a 6-foot bed in the back, a chrome sink with a toilet attached to it, and a little piece of metal sticking out that was supposed to act as a table. Now, since I was in jail, there were no books. Why? There's no library. No library, but you're in jail. No, I was in jail, not prison. So in jail, I was in a place which was called the Special Housing Unit, which is for the roughest, toughest, meanest people. They had put me there, they said, for my own protection. So I was in an 8x10 cell with a little slit in the door where they would serve my food on a tray about 9 inches by 4 inches. And then as soon as I finished eating, they'd take the tray and close it down. And one of the guards said, do you understand there's Wall Street's crashing. I'm worried about my pension fund. What should I do? And I said, sorry, Wall Street's crashing? What's happened? And he said, there's some crisis and some companies are going bankrupt. I said, are you sure? And he said, yeah, it's all over the papers. We're all terrified we're going to lose our life savings because we have either a 401k or our pension funds. We don't know anything about money. Mr. Epstein can you tell us, like, what's going on? Am I going to be able to afford my children's education? Am I going to be bankrupt, like this company called Lehman Brothers? And there's another company in the front page today called Bear Stearns. Oh, no, I said. Why? Because that's the company I was a partner in. And in fact, that was a company I had a very large investment in. So, as a great story, I didn't have my Wall Street Journal, but in the early mornings, you're allowed to make 2 phone calls, collect. And when you pick up the phone, you can dial a number, and when the person picks up, they say, you're getting a call from the Palm Beach County Jail. Will you accept reverse charges? And the person either says yes, and the call goes through, or the person says no. The person I had called was Jimmy Kane, the president of Bear Stearns. And I said, tell me what's going on. And so that my knowledge of the financial crisis happened with Jimmy, who was at the center of the storm, telling me about what Lehman had gone under, and they were trying to figure out a way, should they bail out Bear Stearns?
All right, hold that in your mind while I pull up the next clip. While I'm doing so, I'd like to mention that at another point in this interview, Epstein says they put him in solitary confinement to stop all the inmates from asking him what stocks to buy.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's true. Totally true. Here we go, part 2.
You're telling me here, truthfully, that it never hit you at all of how you'd ended up in a place where you had to make a collect phone call from a jail cell that was 6x9 with a steel bed and your food being passed into a slot.
The question you want to ask is, who was the other call to?
Okay. Who was the other call to?
The other call was to my friend at J.P. Morgan, who was then, I didn't know it at the time, trying to buy Bear Stearns. So at one point, I had 2 phones. It was difficult because they're afraid people are going to hang themselves with the phone cord. So they don't actually come together and they're pretty short. So I was actually going between 2 phones talking to Bear Stearns and J.P. Morgan at the same time.
All right, I'm going to shut up and hear what you have to say, Bob. But before I do, with your permission...
That's a funny still shot.
He's a funny still shot as he's hanging himself with his phone cords. Before I do, I just want to lay out the timeline. Bannon asked Epstein what he's doing in the middle of September about Lehman. Middle of September. And he explains about hearing this for the first time and makes these phone calls. September, Bannon's asking him about. Bear Stearns being acquired by J.P. Morgan happened at the end of May of that year. Epstein went to jail at the end of June of that year.
Yep.
So his timeline is all screwed up. And okay, memory is a fickle thing, but I'm putting this under the category of this man just tells stories. And he's much like I was in solitary confinement because they wouldn't leave me alone. Which stock should I buy? Is the market going up? Is the market going down? And one other thing I'll mention, sorry, Bob, is you just saw an example of a thing he did 20 times in this interview, which is Bannon asked something and Epstein sits back and goes, I'm glad you asked me that question. Good question. And then proceeds to just say 10 minutes of something else that does not answer the question at all.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. And so I was going to take it the same direction you did there, that I had heard some people saying he's got the timeline wrong with having the financial crisis. This guy's an idiot. And I had been open to, cause this is what, they recorded in 2019. So was it 11 years in the past at that point?
Yeah.
Okay. And so,
I get it.
I have been telling story and then I go and check and I realize, wait a minute, something. And you can, okay. But like you said, once I saw the thing and looked at the timelines where I realized, no. There's no way. I mean, I guess we could be generous and say he's ex post reconstructed, but there's no way he's just a little bit off on the dates and is mixing 2 things. That's impossible given this timeline. So again, now you're saying May there, it's the deal. So Bear Stearns gets in trouble they're in charge January, and then it's in March that it's announced that J.P. Morgan's buying them.
Even earlier. So yeah, he's at home.
Yeah, so I don't know, when you're saying me, I don't know if that's like when the deal went through or so, but like it's March 16th is the finalized date of when J.P. Morgan's buying out Bear Stearns.
Yeah,
and
the
also
deal was finalized according to Grok anyway at that date.
Okay. And he said there too, when he's on the phone, he said he was talking to Jimmy Kane, James Kane, who was the CEO of Bear Stearns. He was out of the picture after March. Right. So there's no way.
And Bannon is asking about September.
Right. And so there, again, I was open to the idea, if Epstein were in prison the whole time and he talked on the phone when Bear Stearns went down, and then later he talked on the phone when Lehman went down, maybe he's conflicted. But no, as you pointed out, Adam, that's impossible because he didn't go to jail. He pled guilty on those state charges and cut the deal in June of 2008. So he was in his big posh mansion getting massages from high school girls when when Bear Stearns went down and they took over. And again, it's not just this was a passing interest. He's an investor in there, and he's a guy that can get the CEO on the phone. So when he's telling that story about he was on the phone going back and forth, that couldn't possibly have happened. He's inventing that. It's not that, it happened, but it happened in March, not in September. That's not true, right? He would have, in other words, if it were possible that he actually was talking to guys at J.P. Morgan and Bear Stearns while they were negotiating, that would have been back in, January through March when he wasn't in jail, right? So it can't be that he's going back and forth, with the cords and they won't reach because he can't hang himself. Or so this is crazy. And also too, like it's clear when he's talking about the guards are worried about a financial, and he added the detail too there about, and the other, on the front page was Bear Stearns. No. In September, Bear Stearns was not on the front page, right? So again, if it were just that, I would have said he kind of added that detail or whatever, and whatever. It wasn't necessarily a conscious lie. But that whole story, and he even said it's a great story. Yeah, it is a great story. And
do you remember the original Terminator when, for a brief moment in the hotel room, as he's fixing up his damaged eye and his wrist, the Terminator that is, and the landlord's banging on the door and shouting at him and something, and you briefly see inside the mind of the Terminator as he dials through a list of things to respond.
Right.
That's Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
He just hears a thing and then runs through his little list of stories to say, and out pops one. For example, he told a story in this interview about how he had to eat a whole ton of Almond Joy candy bars in jail because he's afraid of somebody poisoning his food.
Right.
Okay. I don't know if that's going to satisfy the landlord banging at your door,
right.
But whatever.
But you're right too. And then when Bannon asked, and Bannon was trying to get, say, is that because what they say how Bannon never used the word, pedophile or anything like that, but he said for people, accused of, or he said convicted of the crimes or in there for the crimes that you were because of that, and you were like, no, it's because I was wealthy. It was like, so they're trying to poison you because they wanted stock tips? That doesn't make any, anyway.
That was such a weird disconnect. Bannon's like the rest of us thinking that pedophiles have a rough time of it in Gen Pop. But Epstein's like, no. They just were harassing me for financial advice. All right. The next clip is, what does cause stock markets to collapse? Do you have anything else to preface this clip before we just play it?
Not so much, but just again for that last one. So that was a clear-cut example where he's just confidently telling a great story when, if you know the fact, you're like, this can't possibly be. So I that's why we dwelled on that, and we didn't show it here, but there was other parts where it actually would have been better, but the crowding out effect, where Bannon actually knows the timeline very well. Yeah, and Bannon goes through and kind of gives Epstein an out. He's kind of like, so no, Bear already would have been done, and he was just like, yes. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, like you can see the con man at work where the mark is like offering up potential escape hatches to reconcile clear contradictions, and he just went in stride with it, like, yes. Mm-hmm. And it goes on, and you're like, what? No, Bannon, why didn't you just say, wait a second, what you just said isn't possibly correct?
Yeah, there's so many of those. Again, you got to watch this guy. You got to watch this interview. I'm still blown away. All right, let's we've moved on to what causes the financial collapse of '08.
A very big recession in the early 90s based upon real estate and Japan basically imploding.
Let's again,
Okay.
you had a recession in the 90s. I don't know what it's based upon. It's always interesting to look back and say, separate from there's certain triggers, like there, in the 70s there was a...
What do you think it was based upon, the 90s downturn? It's clearly there was a huge downturn.
No, I know there was a downturn. That's what I know for sure. I don't...
That's a fact.
That's all. Everything else is sort of speculation about why did he have that?
I understand that, but
Sorry.
there's some speculation that has 0% probability of being true, and there's others that have 90%. In the range, when you look at the range of alternatives of what could have caused it in 90, and what I'm trying to do is get you all the way up to 2008. Look, you're the smartest guy in the room, right? You know that. Do you think there's anybody in the world today?
Oops, this is going to be a bad question.
No, but do you think anybody in the world today, the Alan Greenspans, the Bernankes, is there any central banker you know, any partner of any Wall Street firm, any guy running a trading desk, and I would take it that would be, or anybody at a Larry Fink at BlackRock, Steve Schwartzman at Blackstone, the top 100 financial guys, and let's throw in a couple of Nobel economists, and let's throw in the best professors at Wharton, at Harvard, at Stanford. Do you think that there's anybody that understands money or understands the world's financial system as good as you?
There must be.
But it doesn't come to the top of the head.
No.
Okay, fine. Now
Now
that I've gotten that, let's go back to 1990. In that arc from the fall of the Berlin Wall to 2008.
Good.
We started with the implosion in Tokyo of the Japanese economy, Japanese financial markets. We had the huge run-up in internet stocks, right? We had the implosion of that in 2000. The bankruptcy of Drexel Burnham in 90. Mm-hmm. Implosion of Japan, huge run-up in equity markets for the internet, implosion of the internet in 2000, 10 years later roughly. Mm-hmm. And then this run-up through the Iraq War and all that, the run-up to 2008. Every 10 years, it seems like, we're in some sort of 10 years before the 1990s was the 70s.
You sound like an astrologer.
Okay.
And not a finance person.
You're supposed to be a mathematician. It just seems to me a pattern of every 10 years.
That's misleading. That's exactly right. Okay. Because people like to see patterns. People like to see patterns where there are none.
This moment, I felt like you, Bob, that, oh my goodness, what a horrible interviewer Steve Bannon is. Because I don't think Epstein had the slightest idea what to say. He was going to retreat into complexity, as he does a million times. And you would have heard an analogy about the human body and doctoring. But instead, Bannon comes with the sunspot argument or whatever in a 10-year cycle of financial crashes. Mm-hmm. So Epstein has an easy out. Oh, you sound like an astrologer.
Yeah. I thought that was just that everything about that exchange was interesting, and especially since at least folks used to think I would talk about economics on this podcast. I thought I'd give them a bone. And so there, I do think, again, with all this stuff, it's hard to say, whether he actually believes this stuff or your kind of read of you're watching him like a poker player. But just to make sure people catch, looking at the stuff at face value, it was interesting. And there are other examples of this too, but there I just grabbed it, where Bannon is trying to say, oh, there was this recession and its cause was da-da-da-da-da. And he's saying, no. I don't know that that's what caused it. I don't think anybody knows what caused it. And so and we'll see this later. One of the clips I included has to do with, I think Epstein, and this kind of would make sense. I think he just thinks the world's all going along for a ride here and nobody's in control of anything and who can say what. And I'm not even responsible for my own actions. And, and it's kind of like, no, there's no good or bad. It's just, hey, things happen, man. And you can't explain why. And let's just go along, hang on.
He could have said, hey, things happen, man. Yeah. After every 5 minutes, he could have said that and it would have fit right in. So, but what's funny though, is there is I don't know if he formally studied this or something, but I mean, that there is a very Chicago school-esque answer.
and like, I don't know if I think we included, but he did like he was trying to explain the housing boom and bust, and he was blaming it on Bill Clinton, but not because of deregulation, but rather like subsidizing, encouraging banks to make loans to people who were not qualified, stuff like that. So he definitely has a free market bent to him.
Or at least he knows things to say on that.
Yeah, right. With all this stuff, like he can deploy that if it's advantageous.
These are all stories for him to deploy. In my argument, that's all this is.
But anyway, so that's in an overarching theme of what he's getting at is that we were in the Santa Fe stuff trying to mathematize, and we just realized there's a lot of stuff that just can't be quantified, man. And so anyway, but here he is taking a very Chicago school. That's like Eugene Fama says there wasn't a housing bubble. What does that even mean? I don't know what a bubble even is. Like, I'm not putting words in his mouth. He actually, prices went up and they came down. But we couldn't have known that in the time because then everyone would have sold earlier. And prices wouldn't have gone up so much. So there you go. So that's kind of his attitude here.
And I'm sympathetic, again, to that worldview, but I think you heard that on a podcast one day or you read it in a book and did he even go to college? Because he dropped out, right? And he's deploying it as a shield. Again, we don't know. He says, derivatives have nothing to do with the crash in 2008. They certainly weren't the cause. And, Bob, you could give a much fuller understanding of what was actually about it. But it's not like derivatives weren't a part of it.
Yeah. Oh, the thing that I liked about that too was where, again, I don't know why Bannon thinks so much of Epstein. Like, that was one of the most amazing parts of this is Bannon just keeps genuflecting to his financial acumen or something.
It made more sense what I found out he was being paid by Epstein at that point.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
You're the smartest guy in the room, right?
People respond to incentives. That's one of the first lessons of economics.
At what point,
all right, so that was real fast. So again, that he said that, but it was interesting. Again, Epstein, his answer was coy because he didn't say, I'm the smartest guy. When he said, are there people there who know it as well as you do? He didn't say yes. He just said there must be. Which is interesting. But then he said, who? And so again, it is this weird thing where he comes off as humble and wise, and yet actually you could say, oh, it wasn't that he was being arrogant. It was that he on the fly couldn't come up with a name. And so he just...
Right, exactly. And, he's being so pedantic, that story about how banking works. At one point, Bannon says, well, I'm not you. I'm just a simple M&A guy, mergers and acquisitions. It's like, you can go ahead and get a little bit more highbrow, Jeffrey Epstein. I'm probably going to be able to follow at least a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think Epstein had anything. He's just the Terminator, deploying random cocktail party gambits and seeing what works.
It's like the lungs. They take in oxygen and they put out carbon dioxide. That's really what you need to...
Who's to say if the hair on your head didn't cause the stroke? I mean, it was part of your body, right? I mean, these things are complicated. It's the most important thing to recognize is complex systems. All right. Steve Bannon is about to say a bad word, and I agree with him. Are you ready, Bob?
I am ready.
Something deeply fucked up with you.
At least something.
Well, we know there are things deeply fucked up with this. You will get through in this film,
right.
But you cannot possibly sit there knowing that you came from nowhere, knowing that you went to the very top of what is considered outside of science and maybe physics, the thing people most admire because it's like alchemy, understanding high finance. To sit there in what will be the defining financial crisis of our time, like Black Friday or Black Monday, whatever it was, in the Great Depression, and be there at that exact moment, triggered in part by a firm that you used to be a partner in and knew intimately well, and it created much of your initial net worth because of, and know that you couldn't, someone who lives on a phone, right?
Yes.
Because you do live on a phone, right?
Correct.
You had to collect calls. You cannot tell me sometime during that day you did not have that conversation with yourself of how the fuck did I do this to myself to put myself in West Palm Beach in a 6x9 cell with a metal fucking bed with a brown shirt that said trustee spelled wrong.
So did I find it amazing that I was there? That's a
not amazing, and I don't want to say it was not funny. Oh, I thought
I wasn't funny.
Right.
But
not amazing.
it was incredible.
Incredible in what way? Incredible, like, how do I do this to myself?
No. It's as incredible as me sitting here in this house. They're both just two sides of the coin. That's how I think about it. That my life today is incredible.
Like you said, Bob, what a wild ride.
Yeah. So that's the clip I had in mind where I thought, all right, I mean, yeah, maybe that's just the whole thing is a BS answer, but it does, like, if that would kind of make sense, right? Like, if that's how he's just, yeah, it means,
One day you're diddling kids, the next day you're in jail, the next day you're getting interviewed by Steve Bannon.
That Sinatra song, That's Life.
As he was,
if he doesn't have things
there,
turning around by June, he'll just going to take those bed sheets and
or tie his TRUSTY trustee jacket and hang himself with it.
The other thing, real quickly on that I could see now is I had the leisure to just sit here and watch it. It looked like he was trying not to bust out laughing.
Yeah,
and I think, like, he's just like, this guy's eating up every word I'm saying, or Bannon knows he's full of it, and they're both putting on a show, and this is like we're watching Macbeth or something. I don't know, but
I was reminded
it looked like he was trying not to laugh.
Yeah, I agree. You ever see the movie Memento?
Yes.
So there's a real funny, at least to me, scene where he can't, every once in a while, every whatever it is, a few minutes, he completely forgets what's going on, and it's like he's waking up for the first time. That's the whole thing about he's got a brain injury, this guy. So in the middle of him being chased by this guy with a gun, he's running through some parking lot or something, and he has this episode, and he sort of wakes up. It's like, oh, now where am I? Oh, I must be chasing this guy. So he heads towards him, and the guy shoots his gun at him. It's like, oh, nope, he's chasing me. Yeah. He starts running away, and I got that same attitude from this.
Yeah,
life's pretty weird, man. I mean, it's literally incredible. Speaking of which, you want to talk about quantum mechanics, or rather, allow Mr. Epstein to tell us about quantum mechanics?
Let's do it.
You just said a while ago, part of this new search for science may go back to when people were actually talking about a soul, and you said there's no doubt in your mind that there is a soul. Describe for me what you mean by that. What do you mean by soul? What do you mean soul different than the physical analog body that we're seeing on film right now?
It's difficult to describe in words. I mean, I'm not a poet. Poems get a little closer to what that really means. But even the concept of what is life becomes complicated when you deal with plants and seeds. Is a seed alive? I don't know. Certain people would say, no, it's dead. When you're a banana, one of my favorite examples is the banana that's sitting on the countertop in your kitchen today. Is it alive or dead?
What do you think about human life? Tell me about human life.
But your banana is alive. That banana is breathing. It's on your. You say that's impossible, Jeffrey. No, it's not.
Is the banana conscious?
All these words. These are words. So everyone's trying to fit very complicated concepts into a very small box called conscious or alive. These don't fit in that way. So if you put your banana in a bag and put another fruit in with it, the fruit ripens faster because the banana breathes with it. We don't understand most of those things. So you asked the big question. Sorry.
You talk about the life. What about human life?
What about it?
Tell me what do you think? What do you think human life is?
It's a miracle. It's a miracle. And when I say miracle, I can't explain it, and I make no attempt to explain it at the moment. We don't know how to think about it. And anyone, again, another one of the Feynman quotes when he was talking about quantum physics. He said, anyone, Jeffrey, who says they understand quantum physics and quantum mechanics and quantum behavior, you know they're lying.
You know they're lying. I don't know if you caught that, ladies and gentlemen, but he just insinuated that Feynman was speaking to him when he said that famous quote about understanding quantum mechanics. Either that or he called Steve Bannon Jeffrey. And yes, Jeffrey, seeds are alive. And, these are just words, man. Why are you trying to tie me down with words like alive and conscious? What do you think? I'm amazed by that whole segment.
Okay, so what's ironic is somehow like a few months ago or something, my one of my kids was asked, kids ask all kinds of stuff, and I sit there and I give them little mini lessons on things. And I did kind of hit a brick. I was trying to explain what's the difference between things being alive or dead, or not. Like I said, like a rock, like it's not, for sure it's not alive. Is it dead? It's not, you know what I mean? Because usually dead kind of means something that was alive or had the capacity. So I was getting all that stuff. And then, and I did actually start thinking about, like, I don't know, if you take some skin off of your finger, is it alive? And, and I was just going through, like, would you say it's an organism? I think I was talking to my 5-year-old. And
it's a little too early to bring out organic and inorganic or something like that.
I might have used those terms, but anyway, it did occur to me, like, when you pull a fruit off, I don't know if I was thinking of banana literally, but I was thinking a piece of fruit, is it alive or dead? You know what I mean? Like, what's the difference between organisms? You know what I mean? Like, there's some weird stuff in there. Like,
sure,
the banana doesn't seem like it's alive the same way a ladybug seems alive, but yet it's more alive than a rock is. And if it starts rotting, it seems less alive. So anyway, it was just funny when he went into that, and I was like, oh no, I had the same thoughts that Jeffrey Epstein did. But anyway, all I'm saying is, and the thing, you're right, with the Feynman stuff and him throwing it, I could totally see, oh yeah,
that's how he talks.
At these parties, with these international movers and shakers, they bring in some models. Let's stipulate that they're all, of legal age. And he's talking to, and like some girl's a poet, right? Some young woman. And he's like, oh, I'm not a poet like you are. Like, you know what I mean? He's already convinced her that, Feynman has told him stuff personally. Because I funded his research back in the day. We tried to communicate with the aliens. It turned out that didn't work, but we're still looking into that. And but what you do, you design dresses. I can't do that. Tell me more. You know what I mean? And oh wow, and this guy has a private jet, and he's interested in my thoughts. Interesting.
Yeah, is just.
I totally okay. I understand how this happened.
Yeah, exactly. Again, ladies and gentlemen, please, you got to watch this interview. But
let me say though, even there, I was getting annoyed at Bannon because I know you were laughing, thinking this is a dumb point. And I know. Actually, the reason it was funny, Adam, is because there was this guy that I had seen doing cutting edge research. Somebody sent me a clip of him, a presentation, and the guy was doing all kinds of research about like how you can trick cells into. This isn't doing it justice, but kind of like, if you cut the tail off of a lizard, like how does it know to grow new like looking locally, the cells aren't that much different from cells somewhere else. So how do they know to grow more of a tail? Like that kind of stuff.
Telomeres. Yeah.
And so I was thinking of asking that guy just to warm up and to say, like, okay, like, is a piece of fruit still alive? Or, you know what I mean? Just to, anyway. And so, but it's not that I would have thought the guy would say, we don't know. It's just that somebody this is his area, just like I can say, well, Bob, is Bitcoin money or not? Whether you agree with my answer, I thought about it, and I can tell you here's our framework and how we would apply it. You know what I mean? So
I think I know what was going on in Epstein's head, because we were at the point of the interview where they're running out of time, or Bannon thought they were, and he'd moved into bad cop, bad interviewer. So he's asking him, like, or do you think you're the devil? Epstein's thinking, like, when you're bringing up what's a soul, do you believe in the souls? And then is what's coming next? What do you think about the souls of your victims or whatever? So I think that's when he retreated into, life's just a mystery, man. These are just words, and life is complex. And I think that he was just in pure bob and weave mood, up against the ropes.
Oh, I'm sorry, but I didn't finish my train of thought. That real fast is, so since I had thought that would be an interesting avenue, it was annoying me when Epstein happened to be going down the same path. Again, he just ended up saying, I don't know. He said, we don't know, which I don't think is correct. Like, I believe he doesn't know. But then Bannon, instead of letting him at least play that out, was like, but is the banana conscious? And it's like, that's not what he's talking. He's trying to define what does life mean versus non-life. And he's trying to, so anyway.
Maybe they're both getting tired. I have one last clip to play.
Okay.
And again, from my perspective, I didn't know much about this guy except, the record, what he'd done.
Was set up by Dave Smith, Candace Owens.
How much do you get paid for defending this guy? I'm just curious. No, I didn't. I mean, I'd never heard him speak. I'd never seen him in an interview. So again, this was just amazing. And again, I'm a poker player, so maybe I'm hallucinating, but I think I'm seeing into the guy's head a little bit, because that's just what I think I can do a little bit. And what I watched in this interview was him. Again, very early, he learned this idea about I think he'd even forgotten how the idea started, the difference between a complicated system and a complex system. But he likes that complex system idea, and he hides behind it all the time when he's bobbing and weaving and saying, I'm going to give you this dumbed down version because you wouldn't understand the more complicated version. Even I don't. I mean, does anybody really? And so he's got that whole shtick, and I think he's a gigantic fraud. And in this video interview, I think he tells us his origin story a little bit. So let me play it.
When you first got on the trading desk at Bear Stearns in the late 70s or mid 70s, were you shocked by how little actual understanding of mathematics that the traders comprehended?
Yeah, well, again, we had a Texas Instrument calculator. Most stockbrokers, especially before 1975, if they were good stockbrokers, could add. That's about it. They could multiply. If you could multiply, you were already in the top 15% of stockbrokers. Stockbrokers simply meant there's a story. When I went to the first person, I had no money, and I said, "How much money do you make a year?" And he said, $400,000. I said, "Impossible. I'm making $10,000."
That's probably more than your family had made in its entire existence.
Yes. And he makes it in a year. I said, "What do you do?" And he said, "It's too complicated for you to understand," which is what the main thrust of Wall Street people, they want to tell you it's too complicated. Because if you understood that person was simply, he had a brother-in-law, in fact, in this case, who ran the pension fund at General Motors. His brother-in-law would call him and say, "Buy 1,000 IBM. He'd hang up the phone, he'd write it out on a ticket and walk it to a window. That was his entire skill set. Hello, write what my brother-in-law says, walk it to a ticket window.
All right. If that story is even true, because this guy is a liar.
There's no way that's true.
Oh, fine. But let's just assume that something happened that got these ideas in his head. I think he said, people love to lie and pretend things are more complex than they really are. And it's not what you know, it's who you know. Mm-hmm. So what I'm going to do is learn everything I can about manipulating humans, and that's just going to be that. I'm going to pretend to know a bunch of stuff, but what I really know is important people, and that's how I'm going to make my way in the world. And yeah, you're probably right. That story is it's probably fictional, just like everything else.
Well, actually, to be clear, what I mean is there's no way a guy back then earned $400,000 a year merely for carrying out purchase orders from his brother-in-law. Like there's no way, unless the brother-in-law was like giving him money to keep his sister happy or something. But what I could see though is if the guy just lied to him, like maybe the guy made $80,000 a year and just told him that, like, you punk kid, like why are you asking me how much I make? I make $400,000 a year.
What if his brother-in-law? What if his brother-in-law bought it one day, sold it that afternoon, and bought it again? And oh my God, the fees he was racking up.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm just saying this story as like those facts couldn't be true.
I agree,
guess I could agree. He told him that because he's thinking, why are you asking me how much I make, you punk kid? So,
but as soon as he tells that story, I'm like, well, that's you. You've turned yourself into that guy. At least in your own head, you have.
Yeah.
I think. So. I encourage people, watch the whole interview. You won't believe the stories this guy tells. And I was not impressed by he's the smartest guy in the room shtick by the end of it. He's the smartest guy among the drunks at the cocktail bar at 1 a.m. I'll give him that. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Well, what's funny though is given our world, I mean, and I guess you could say it caught up with them, but it's like that is enough. In other words, there are 200 people that with enough power and wealth that, if you can get on the ins with them and do what you do, you could be. I think he's worth at least $500 million when he died. So I guess there is that.
And this conversation goes all into math and philosophy, and it just gets so weird. And that wasn't the first time he mentioned Texas Instrument calculators. So, in case you want to hear more about that.
As if you needed more.
As if you needed more. All right. I can see you glancing at the clock, Bob. So, let's wind it down. Please go to bobmurphyshow.com for all of Bob's episodes, also his YouTube page. Go to mine as well, Haman Nature. I write articles on my Substack. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
I was going to say, folks, I have been encouraged to actually say, yes, like and subscribe if you're watching it on mine or on Adam's, and that really does help with the algorithm. And also, we had some clashes in the comments. Leave comments. Like, who do you agree with, Adam or me?
Leave comments. Yeah, they should all be supporting my viewpoint, obviously. But yeah, fight in the comments section. And please do like and subscribe our channels. I'm not even monetized yet. Help a fella out. Any final comments?
Just if you're gonna lie about anecdotes, make sure your timeline's right.
Very wise, Bob. Thank you. Great as always, and we'll catch you next time, ladies and gentlemen.
So long, folks.